that will I seek after, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. For God will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. God will conceal me under the cover of the tent of the Lord. God will set me high on a rock. Now my head is lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in the tent of the Lord sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord.
So many Advents, so many years of expectation, waiting, watching, longing for God to come and make all things right. Last week's devotion focused on a young King David. Today's section of Psalm 27 reminds me not of a youth, but of some elders, old man Simeon and old woman Anna. One thing I ask of the Lord, that will I seek after, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Can't you hear those words on their lips as they came day after day to the temple? And I wonder, what was it in their watching and waiting and beholding and inquiring that prepared them to recognize love incarnate in such an unexpected child, born to humble parents in humble circumstances? What had they glimpsed along the way that gave them a foretaste of love so amazing, so divine? Had they heard stories of God's deliverance, times when God had brought freedom and life in the midst of seeming defeat, using unexpected people? Had they seen acts of faithfulness and compassion in the thousands of temple goers who had crossed their path? As their physical eyes failed them, had they sharpened the sight of their hearts through practices of prayer and worship, growing in their trust that God would show up and meet them where they were? Simeon and Anna remind me of a story told by Father Walter Burghardt about an old farmer who would stop at a chapel on his way home from the fields. Knowing that the man just sat in the chapel, apparently doing nothing at all, a neighbor asked him, "Well, what goes on when you sit there?" The old man smiled and said, "I look at the good God, and the good God looks at me." Now, we know that dwelling in the house of the Lord doesn't mean spending all of our time sitting in temples and in church buildings. It does mean paying attention to when and where and how God shows up. So I sit at a card table playing bridge with my mother, who is in the midst of Alzheimer's. She is sitting across from a grandson whom she does not often recognize or remember his name. But still she tells him, "You played that hand well. You're a good card player." And while I know that my heart will still break, and I long for God's eternal healing, in that small moment of kindness, God meets me with hope, shines a light in the darkness, and gives me good courage. I visit a small congregation where a worship guest brings a concern for the environment and the effects of climate change. She feels called to find a place where she can put her faith into action. Weeks later, a group of 20 or so gather to become better informed and consider their stewardship of creation. And while I know that there will be struggle, there might even be conflict, as they move from conversation to action, I still glimpse God's saving presence for a creation that groans in suffering. Like Simeon and Anna, we are waiting for the Lord. But as we wait, we watch, we pay attention, we look at and for the God who looks on us with forgiveness, grace, and mercy all the days of our lives. So tell the stories. Light the candles. Lift up your heads and sing and make melody, so that this Christmas, your hearts and your arms will be open to receive all the hope and courage that God so wants to give in Jesus, the Christ.